Journey back in time again with the BassMaster magazines. We're going back to September, October 1974. I am almost through my year, my first active year fishing the BASS circuit. So let's see. Oh, this is kind of an interesting bait. They called it a scout. Bill Dance promoted it. And really what it was now, the versions of it you see now are what we call wake baits. Baits that you can wake on top or subsurface. Some of them look more like crankbaits than this one does. Some of them, but they essentially are the same thing. And I remember when Bill was really promoting this bait he called the Scout. And now knowing what I know, I didn't know much about that kind of bait back then, a wake bait. But now what I know about it, it was really a kind of a really good introduction to our sport. And it proved that Bill wasn't just a worm fisherman, because that's what everybody kind of associated him with. And this one's just, again, the Harry and Charlie, which was one of the Don Worth did for BASS. Was really still one of the neatest editions they had on a magazine basis. This is where Harry and Charlie go to classic, and what I kind of like about it, look what that tackle box is sitting on. It's sitting on a scale, because all my first classics, I hadn't been to one yet. This was going to be my first year that I would qualify. You can only take 10 pounds, and when they announce a site and you fly there and you get there, you get off the bus and you started getting your tackle and stuff. That was the first thing they would do. They would weigh your tackle box. And if it was over 10 pounds, Harold Sharp got to select what he liked the most out of your box. It could have been one of your hand-carved Fred Young Big O's, but he was taking it. So, and of course, Bill Dance and Jimmy Houston, them were all tricksters. Well, I don't know to this day exactly who did it, but somebody stuck a brick in Jimmy Houston's tackle box. How they got it in there, I don't know, because I know it was stuffed full of everything else. And so it weighed a good 5 pounds over 10. So Harold was going to select 5 pounds of lures until it went down to the accepted 10 pounds out of that box. Of course, it was a joke, and they finally, he didn't know it at first and said, it can't weigh that much. And anyway, it's just, again, this is Ray with I guess a mermaid of some type, theoretically announcing that everybody sitting on the airplane when they were 30,000 feet in the air going, this is where we're going. Belly button bio. Again, Ray really, I guess he made quite a bit of money off these, because they supplied all the boats, and they had to get them across the country without anybody figuring out where they were going. And I never heard a leak in all the years they were doing that, which only did that for about the first 3 or 4 years that I fished the event. And then, of course, he was going to sell them. And there's one, and they're being sold. This is a $7,000 boat that he says, I'm selling for $5,500. That doesn't even sound right. Now, does your engine cost more than that? Not counting everything else in the boat. And here's the other thing, though. He does, see, nowadays, with all the sonar and the forward facing, and there's a tremendous amount of depth finders on the bow. Do you see one on the bow of that boat? There's not even a depth finder on the bow of that boat. And slowly they got rid of these little dudes, these anchors, because bass fishermen rarely ever used an anchor. There was only one time it really played a role. It's when you beat somebody to a spot The only way you could keep them off that spot was to dry. You had to be anchored. You had to have an anchor rope down, and everybody had to stay 50 yards away from you if you were anchored. So that was the only purpose the anchor served. And if you guys did that, but as far as really anchoring for a purpose, no. And I looked at these. These are all just cartoons of things that anglers do, and I did most of these. Like you're not paying attention, you're reeling your crankbait in, and the troll motor catches the line, almost yanks it out of your hands, your rod out of your hands. That really was the most exciting when it happened at night. You didn't know at first, what the fudge, you know. And here's one, and Melissa, she was present when I did this one time. Who put the plug in the drain of the boat before we launched? So I did that several times where I absolutely missed. And this guy, you hooking a guy in the boat with you. I only, in all of my career, I only hooked one guy in the boat, and I got it with 2 guys in the boat at times. Not in tournaments, you only had 2, but I got it with 3 of us in the boat, counting me. And but the worst I ever saw a guy get hooked was when you guide, you're running the troll motor, you're up front. Then there's a guy in the middle or standing on a big deck right behind you. Then there's a guy in the back, on the back deck in the seat. And the guy in the middle hooked on a red rattle trap, a big one, and it jumped. And when it did, the bait flew out of the, he had that rod totally bent over, and the bait flew out of that fish's mouth, and here it came back at us. And he said, "Look out." And I kind of went like this, and then all of a sudden I heard it go. And I turned around, and his partner behind him had this stunned look on his face, and his mouth is like that. And then all you could see was that red tip of that red rattle trap sticking out of his mouth. And I went, oh my goodness, I hope he's not hooked. But he was. It hooked him in the tongue. So that's one we took to the dock and to the doctor. I didn't try to take that one out. And I've seen this one happen more often than not, where you set the hook back when you used to sit. I didn't do it, but I had customers constantly do it. And there's these swivel seats that spin around and throw them out of the boat. Throw them in, most of the time in the bottom. They didn't go in the lake. So, like I said, I've been there on most of these. And again, here we're back on the tournament trail. And this picture, this was the first Bass Federation winners. And here's a guy I remember right there, Charlie Campbell. And this is the tournament that made Charlie Campbell kind of famous as the Zara Spook guy in the fishing, bass fishing annals. He had the top weight in this tournament of his team. Right here you see 55 pounds, 15 ounces. And he called them all on Zara Spook. And it was kind of a neat deal. Now here's something I saw that I did not know. When I instruct people how to tie on a Rico, I tell them to tie directly to the eye. Don't use a snap or anything if you want to correct. And then I tell them, push that knot down into the very bottom of the eye if you want to get the correct action. Charlie did that with the Zara Spook. And I did not know that until I read this here. And here's the points leaders. And I'm still kind of hanging in for the Classic. I'm in 24th place with only one tournament to go at Clark Hill Reservoir. Bill's leading the whole pack again. I don't think he caught a fish on the Scout, but but still he's leading the pack. And then these are more of the guys I started fishing against. Ricky Green, Roland, Elroy Kruger, my favorite all-time personal mentor. You know, John Powell, Bobby Murray, Johnny Morris, Tommy Martin, Tom Mann. I mean, I can go on, and these guys. And here, does anybody know the trivia to this question? Who was the first guy to wear a Evel Knievel suit in bass fishing? Because we all started, and we all kind of followed him. In other words, you know, how fishermen look nowadays with all the patches and the stripes and the shirts and all of that. It was a guy named Roger Moore. I mean, he came, back then, if you'd ever seen Evel Knievel, who was the stunt man that did all the motorcycle jumps over the Grand Canyon in Vegas, he looked like, he was dressed like, and that's where all the fancy shirts started to change. Up until then, if you look at most of these pictures, even Bill here's not wearing anything shirt-wise but a normal shirt. And this is again just the tournament we had in Virginia at Bugs Island, and this tournament was included into the standings I saw there a minute ago. And it was basically, I think I squeaked into the money on this one too, 26. So the cash, I got $275. Wow, dang. Oh.
So where was this Virginia Invitational?
Yeah, it was at a lake that got renamed. We all call it Bugs Island, and it was right there outside, south of Richmond, Virginia. And it was a good lake. That's where I got to draw Fred Young, and he fished with me and gave me the famous Fred Young lures.
And do you remember where you were on the lake and what you caught him on?
I remember I didn't do well until the final day, and the boy I drew in the tournament, he didn't do well either. He was a local boy, and the lake had a lot of rain, the upper reaches of it earlier, and the practice was muddy. And I said, where can we go? There's not going to be anybody else, but you've caught fish in the past. Oh, he said, there's nobody up in this muddy part of the river way up the lake. I said, let's go there. And we went there and we slayed them. Both of us had 2 of the top 10 catches, and I caught him on a worm. I remember I was throwing I was throwing a gator tail worm, which is the one I ended up using when I won in 2016 at St. John's River. But they were pre-spawn fish. And that muddy river had kind of held them back from spawning, but they were really, it'd been long enough that the river was starting to clear, and there wasn't nobody up there, like you said. That does it for September, October 1974.